Hi, this is Gwen Fisher with Environmental and Occupational Health 6639, the Occupational Health Psychology course discussing improving health and well-being at work. This is Module 3 about work motivation, and specifically the segment Module 3.3, in which we're discussing process-based theories of work motivation. Prior to this, we talked about needs-based theories, and now we're going to move on to talk about process-based theories. Here is the agenda for Module 3.3. First, I will provide a brief introduction to process-based theories. Then I will present 3 specific process-based theories, which include equity theory, organizational justice, and expectancy theory. I will conclude the module with a brief summary. Here are the learning objectives that I have in mind for Module 3.3. By the completion of this module, you should understand and be able to explain process-based theories of work motivation in your own words. These include understanding and being able to explain equity theory, organizational justice, and expectancy theory. Process-based theories of work motivation differ from needs-based theories in that these theories focus on how motivation arises and what factors cause motivation to exist. These theories have a cognitive component to them. In other words, thinking of cognitive ability as our ability to perceive, process, evaluate, compare, create, understand, manipulate, or generally think about information and ideas, motivation can come from either a cognitive choice or, as you'll see and learn in this module, a cognitive appraisal of a self-regulation process. Equity theory originated from a famous theory in social psychology, which is referred to as cognitive dissonance theory. Cognitive dissonance theory was originally proposed by a researcher by the name of Festinger back in the 1950s, specifically in 1957. Cognitive dissonance theory suggested that tension exists when individuals hold incompatible thoughts, in other words, dissonant cognitions between a couple of ideas. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you are on your way to work and you spill your coffee. On one hand, it's understandable if you're a bit frustrated, but you may rationalize or deal with the incompatible frustration about that by saying, oh, there wasn't much left anyway, and there's more coffee available at work. I can always get another cup. That might not be a real significant issue. Hopefully you're not like me where you spill your coffee all over your white or light colored shirt or sweater. But imagine a situation in which a woman smokes. And I think many of us know that smoking can lead to lung cancer. And in this example, imagine the woman smokes despite knowing that it can lead to lung cancer. However, she may tell herself that she continues to do it because she needs it to help with her anxiety. In other words, she experiences these incompatible thoughts between knowing on one hand that smoking might lead to cancer, and on the other hand, that maybe it serves a purpose. Now that you understand a little bit about dissonance theory, let me tell you about equity theory. Equity theory refers to the comparison that individuals make to determine if what they are receiving is fair compared to the amount that they are giving. Inputs are things that the person brings to and contributes to the situation, such as education, experience, time, and effort. Outcomes or outputs are things that the person gets from the organization, such as recognition, pay, or a promotion. A key component to equity theory is that there is a comparison of the ratio that matters most to understanding someone's feelings of equity, rather than the actual absolute amount that they have put in or received. In other words, it's really based on a cognitive appraisal or perception of this ratio rather than perhaps actual numbers. And two people in a similar situation might feel differently. We'll talk about that in a moment. So if an individual perceives that they are contributing an enormous amount to a company, but receiving little in return, he or she will probably feel unfairly treated. On the other hand, an employee who feels he or she contributes little and receives little in return may perceive a high sense of equity fairness in the organization. Putting in little and receiving little, maybe not dissatisfied with that. A key part of understanding this ratio is the referent other or the comparison person. This could be a coworker, a person from a different organization, could be your spouse or partner or a friend, or a combination of people in the employee's mind or even a hypothetical person. In other words, it's not just what you give and what you get from work, but how well this ratio fits with your understanding in comparison to other people. Using an example, if a person puts in little effort but gets paid little, that's one thing. But if their coworker puts in little effort and gets paid a lot, that causes a lot of feelings of inequity. So where does motivation factor into this? Because inequity is unpleasant, we don't like feeling that we're putting in a lot and not getting out of it what we would hope or expect, that we have an unpleasant state of affairs in which we're motivated to reconcile this inequity. And so we will initiate behavior in one way or another. So if you, for example, don't think that you're getting paid enough, you might go to your boss or your supervisor and ask for a raise. Or if you know that you can't get paid more, then you may actually reduce effort on the input side and just maybe not work as hard. Again, I'm not saying that you would actually do that, but hopefully you understand my point and understand the example. This figure shows what I just explained with regard to the ratio of inputs to outputs. Over on the left side in blue indicates my output and my input as a ratio. And then on the other hand, comparing to the referent other's output over the input. The original equity theory has evolved since it was originally created. For example, it's hard to imagine that all employees have exactly the same ideas about equity and what is the ideal ratio. In fact, based on this idea, motivation scholars have studied just this question of what's called equity sensitivity. Equity sensitivity refers to how much an individual prefers to receive an outcome relative to his or her inputs in comparison to a referent other. In other words, it represents an individual's orientation toward exchange relationships. Individuals may be classified as benevolents if they have a greater tolerance for and are comfortable with giving more inputs than outcomes. Equity sensitives if they prefer an equal ratio of inputs and outcomes. Or entitleds, those who prefer to receive more in outcomes relative to their inputs. Now let's talk about organizational justice. Organizational justice is very similar to equity theory, and in fact, it originated from equity theory. But it differs a bit because it also focuses more globally on the notion of fairness, and it's less of a calculation of specific inputs and outcomes. It's also different in that it takes the process into account as well as interpersonal treatment. Another way to think of this is that organizational justice theory is an extension of equity theory. Research shows that perceptions of justice, which we define as the idea that an action or decision is fair and just, are powerful predictors in understanding how much motivation and trust an individual will have. An employee's sense of organizational justice reflects how fair he or she believes that an employer is to employees. Studies have consistently shown that justice perceptions relate to three aspects of fairness, including procedural justice, interpersonal justice, and distributive justice. Procedural justice refers to the fairness of policies and guidelines used to make decisions. For example, you may not get the promotion that you wanted, but you would feel better about it if you felt that a fair process was used. This particular type of justice is very relevant to my life right now. My son has been getting ready to try out for the competitive travel hockey team, And I've noticed that the coaches are putting in a great deal of effort to make sure that regardless of who they decide to select for the top team, the middle team, and the lower team, that they give each player a fair enough opportunity to demonstrate their skills. So hopefully they perceive a fair process, in other words, procedural justice. Distributive justice refers to perceptions of fairness in terms of the actual outcomes of a decision or action. So for example, if your boss is evaluating you and 3 other coworkers to determine a raise, whether you end up satisfied or perceiving that the ultimate outcome, in other words, the percentage or the amount of your raise, if that is fair. In the case of the hockey example, distributive justice refers to the decision about what team my son will be placed on. Interpersonal justice refers to the way in which we are treated by others within the organization where we work. For example, you would feel better about your not getting a promotion if you were treated with respect during the promotion process. Or if someone said thank you and used a lot of good manners and just made you feel good about yourself, regardless of the process being used, as well as regardless of the outcome. This slide shows the relationship between perceived organizational justice and a lot of common outcomes that we can think about in the workplace. Justice perceptions are important antecedents to individual and organizational outcomes, such as organizational commitment, perceived organizational support, the quality of the relationship with the supervisor, our motivation for performing a particular task, whether we engage in what you've read in the book is about organizational citizenship behaviors, in other words, the likelihood that we'll go above and beyond and engage in things that make the workplace better, even if it's not part of our job, as well as I indicated, organizational support. Perceptions of justice are negatively correlated with counterproductive behaviors at work. In other words, those who are more likely to perceive injustice are also more likely to engage in counterproductive or negative work behaviors. So positive justice, less counterproductive work behavior; injustice or lack of justice, more counterproductive work behavior. Now let's talk about expectancy theory. Expectancy theory was originally developed by Victor Vroom in the 1960s, and it explains what motivation people have or their tendency to behave one way instead of another, focusing on their goals and where they put their efforts. There are 3 core components to expectancy theory: expectancy, instrumentality, and valence. These are tied into one's beliefs about the degree to which effort leads to performance, and that performance will lead to a desired outcome. Expectancy represents the extent to which individuals believe that their efforts will lead to their desired performance. For example, if George believes his effort is likely to lead to higher performance, he is said to have high expectancy. Expectancy can be influenced by how capable a person believes he is at performing this particular behavior, how difficult it is, and how much control he believes that he has over the results. Instrumentality reflects the degree to which an individual expects their performance to lead to an outcome or reward. The reward may be external, such as a bonus, or internal, such as satisfaction experienced from doing a task well. For example, if Jan believes that higher performance will result in a reward, she should be more motivated. In order to have high instrumentality, the employee must be able to trust in the connection between effort and outcomes, such as through a formal company policy outlining the terms of the required behavior and its rewards, or a supervisor who consistently rewards good performance. Instrumentality may also be impacted by the level of performance required to result in the desired outcome. If employees are promoted on a strict system of seniority, then there's no need for an employee to attempt to work hard to receive a promotion, and her instrumentality will consequently be low. If you know anything, if you remember anything from having taken chemistry, then you may know what valence refers to. Just like the attracting or repelling force of an element, Vroom reasoned that psychological objects in the environment also have attracting and repelling forces. So valence refers to or defines the value that a person places on a reward. Using the previous example, if Jan wants a bonus, she should be motivated. But if the bonus is small, say maybe a $5 gift card, it probably won't do much to motivate her and might even lead to feelings of injustice. It's important to keep in mind that variables such as a person's values, their needs, and goals influence how valuable and thus motivating rewards are to that particular individual. Different people will have a high valence for different types of rewards. This goes back to what we've previously discussed about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. Extrinsically motivated employees may value a promotion or paid time off, whereas a more intrinsically motivated employee may place the most value on an opportunity to choose his or her next assignment or be entrusted with a more meaningful task. Together, expectancy, instrumentality, and valence are used to calculate what we call motivational force, which in this particular case is V times I times E, hence VIE theory. Because this is a multiplicative formula, if any one of the components of V, I, or E goes to 0, there will be no motivation or motivation will fall. The underlying assumption in expectancy theory is that individuals choose to behave in the way that produces the most motivational force. Another concept inherent to expectancy theory is that it's based on an individual's belief in the valence, the instrumentality, and the expectancy, not necessarily the reality of the situation. In other words, our perceptions are critically important. The notion of perception being reality and perception being important is certainly a theme that we will discuss more as we proceed with this course. So according to VIE theory, using this theory to determine if someone is motivated, one would ask the following questions. Do you believe that effort is likely to lead to performance? That's expectancy. Do you believe that performance is likely to lead to outcomes? Instrumentality. Do you value these likely outcomes, which is valence? So an important note about expectancy theory is that meta-analytic evidence indicates that the VIE components predict work-related outcomes. In other words, it's based on prior research by Van Erd and Thierry in 1996. They concluded that although the components of VIE do predict work-related criteria, it's not clear that the model works as it is predicted in that simple, clear multiplicative relationship that I just showed on the previous slide. In other words, they say it could be more of an additive relationship. They recommend additional research in order to investigate this further. At the heart of the debate about the efficacy of the VIE model is the difference in how the expectancies are calculated. For example, should they be multiplied or added? Research in areas of training motivation and test-taking motivation have consistently found that at least some aspects of the VIE model affect motivation in those arenas. Managers tell us that they find this theory useful because it helps them to explicitly diagnose or identify why a given employee might not be motivated. One thing managers can do is ask 3 simple questions, starting with, has this employee done this job effectively in the past? If not, it may be an issue that the employee is not having enough resources, such as good training, rather than motivation. Does an employee's good performance lead to good outcomes in this organization? If not, the reward system may need to be redesigned to make the job more motivating. Third question is, does this employee appear to value the reward for a job well done? If not, this is an opportunity to reconsider what employees do find valuable and to better link what is provided in the form of rewards with the efforts. So this is an opportunity to reconsider this. Perhaps it's additional time off or being recognized by upper management or a bonus. Oftentimes, companies assume that workers are motivated by money, but many people would rather have more time off work or better quality work environment or perhaps flexible work time or being able to work from home from time to time. So asking each of these questions and considering the associated answers can be a valuable tool for managers hoping to disentangle the motivation puzzle. briefly summarize what we've discussed with regard to process-based theories. Motivation impacts cognitive assessments in terms of where to direct effort and how intensely people work. In the theories that we discussed, pretty much across the board, there is some level of comparison between inputs and outcomes, whether it's explicit as indicated in equity theory, or whether it's more of a general perception of fairness, like explained with organizational justice theory. There's still some notion of this comparison in VIE theory as well. Another common note here is that it's individuals' perceptions of the situation that are important rather than the actual calculation. And that was evident in equity theory in terms of the comparative other, and who you choose as your comparison other can really have a strong impact on your perceptions. As I indicated at the beginning of this module, one of the ways in which process-based theories really differ from the other types of theories like needs theories is that there's a bit of cognitive processing and evaluation taking place. And finally, a bit of social comparison by which we determine and form perceptions of equity, perceptions of justice, as well as understand certain expectancies and so forth. So we covered all of these theories in this particular section, and that concludes what I wanted to discuss. The next topic that we will discuss with regard to work motivation is goal setting theory. Thank you.